It is hello everybody. Вітаю усіх. Це
Welcome everyone. It is a great pleasure to see you at an event that is titled Ukrainian-Jewish Relations in the Dissident Movement.
Hello everybody. Thank you for coming for the international event Roundtable, Ukrainian-Jewish Relations in Dissident Movement. The event is organized. Добре, я говорю українською.
I will be speaking in Ukrainian.
Переклад.
We have interpretation available throughout today's roundtable.
And at the beginning, I suggest for my colleague from Indiana University to say instruction how we use simultaneous translation. Please, Lindsay.
Thank you, Yulia. Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to have you here at our shared event. Again, we're also proud to offer interpretation between Ukrainian and English. To enable the interpretation, you'll want to click on the three dots that say More at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and you'll want to select Interpretation. All of this information is in the chat as well, so you can look there if you need to refer back to it.
Thank you, Lindsay. Друзі, будь ласка, ми маємо переклад.
Friends, we have interpretation available at today's event. You can find the instruction on how to enable it in the chat box, and I'm going to mention it one more time. You can find three dots at your bottom Zoom screen. It says More. You click that icon, and then you'll be able to see the word Interpretation. And you will be able to choose the language. I cannot see it, but I hope that it works for you. Yes, I have interpretation. And when you click interpretation, you can pick either English or Ukrainian. We did it. Thank you. Did it work for everyone? Well, I hope that it did. I will be speaking in Ukrainian. Sometimes I also might be switching to English. Hence, we have interpretation into English available. Welcome once again. I'm sorry that I keep repeating it a few times, but I see that we have more and more participants joining us. Therefore, we have to once again repeat this introductory remarks. In the coming 90 minutes, we will have invited speakers who will participate in our roundtable, Ukrainian and Jewish dissidents, and you saw the description of our speakers when you were submitting an application to participate. You can submit your questions or comments into the chat box throughout our conversation. We will be reading them from time to time, commenting on them from time to time. And the last 30 minutes of our roundtable will be dedicated to Q&A session so that you can ask your questions out loud or voice your comments and interact with the speakers of our today's roundtable. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say that today's event is co-organized by the Center for Research of History and Culture of Eastern European Jewry at the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy and the Robert Byrnes Russian and East European Institute of Indiana University, located in Bloomington, USA. And as an organizer from Ukraine side, I would like to thank for the support and cooperation with Indiana University for demonstrating their interest to this event. Today, we have a very respected cohort of speakers. These are people whose names are already enshrined in the history. These are people with unique destinies. These are people who are the walking proof of values of freedom, freedom of speech, fighting for their own dignity, fighting for the rights that have been violated during the Soviet days, the rights of the people who wanted to actualize their talents and people who wanted to live as if they lived in a democratic state. I am not gonna introduce in detail every single speaker. I'll just briefly mention who is with us. Unfortunately, some people had changed in their schedule. For example, Mr. Mykola Horbel currently has a power outage and he will join us at a later stage. So now we have Josef Zissels here with us, Miroslav Marinovich, Arya Vudka, Rabbi Yosef Mendelevich, Zoran Popaduk, Alexa Riznikov, Anatoly Goldfeld, and David Mayan Chernoglas. So these are our respected guests today, and it is a pleasure that this event is happening. And I know that these people are well known. We know that their life path intersected, unfortunately not in the most nice places, such as camps and prison. They haven't seen each other for years. And today's meeting aims to so to say, open a new page of reflection about what did this cooperation give? What did this interaction impact? This interaction between Ukrainian and Jewish dissidents. Also, there is a discussion about the terminology, and I'm very grateful to Mr. Rabinovich for mentioning his comment regarding whether it is a dissident or not. For Rabbi Mendelevich, thank you for mentioning that. And you know, now we're talking about the resistance movement in Ukraine, and it is a broader notion. And the dissidents that appeared in the 60s and the 70s, they only form part of this resistance movement. And not all dissidents say that we're dissidents. Some say that I'm just a person who was fighting for the rights. So maybe we're not gonna outline this as a topic of our discussion, because we probably need to organize a separate conversation to talk about the terminology. But since the topic of our roundtable mentions that we're talking about the dissident movement, I will be using that term. Of course, you can use a different one. You can talk about human rights defense, fighting for human rights, or any other terms, but I will be referring to it as dissident movement. And we have, you saw some of the questions that we have mentioned prior to our event, but we don't necessarily need to strictly stick to those questions. Our discussion can also go in whatever direction that our speakers find interesting, where they would like to talk about something. And first, the first question that I suggest we discuss is whether it is possible to speak of the emergence of a camp ethic of solidarity. And
тобто, як воно виглядало, ця етика солідарності?
What did this ethic look like?
Чому її не було, скажімо, за межами табору такої?
Why did it not exist outside of the camp, this type of solidarity that emerged in the camps? And now I'd like to give the floor to our speakers to comment about this camp ethic of solidarity. Is it a proper definition, or should we put it and phrase it in a different way? And I'd like to give the floor to Josef Zissels, as a person that I'm closely cooperating with when it comes to learning the dissident heritage. And thanks to Josef Zissels, Ukrainian dissident of Jewish origin, I got in touch with similar dissidents in Israel, and he helped me a great deal with organizing this event. So over to you. Please do not forget to unmute your mic, Josef. Good evening, esteemed organizers of the Roundtable, colleagues, my dissident brothers, and dear audience, those who joined us for this interesting roundtable. First and foremost, I'd like to say that the first question is clear. And what I know about the dissident movement, well, it's not that I am looking at it from the scholarly perspective, but I've been familiar with it since the 60s of the past century, and I believe that this is a very fit, very suitable question, and it is true. A certain ethic of cross-religion, cross-nationality solidarity did emerge in the camps. This ethics did emerge, and after that, people carried it after they have been released from the camps and prisons. The only thing is that I didn't go through these camps where my brothers, such as Aryavudka, as the family of Mendelevich and Miroslav Marinovich did, as well as David Mayan. I've known him since the 60s, for the first time when the chronicles of the current affairs mentioned him. So I am familiar with them. And the fact that they participated in the dissident movement, and for me this is a very broad notion, because there was also the Zionist movement, Ukrainian national movement, and various religious movements. All of the aforementioned for me are components of the dissident movement. Well, at least this is my understanding of the dissident. This ethic did emerge, and we know multiple examples of how it was manifested. It was especially important back then during the imprisonment times, since imprisonment days were very harsh. There was a lot of pressure from the camp administration and the committee of the state security that was overseeing these camps. And under so much pressure, of course, it would have been impossible to survive without having any ethics. And this ethic was manifested in very many different ways. For example, there are well-described examples, and I also describe it in my article about Ukrainian-Jewish dissidents, when one of the Ukrainian dissidents was beaten up, and then there was a joint protest. By the way, Mr. Mendelevich, who is present here, his word mattered a lot. Say, if someone has been beaten up, and if we do not fight for them, and then say, if we get beaten up, no one is gonna also step in. And this is a very good example of this ethics and this solidarity. And the camp administration stepped back. And this was very important. Very important for the person that was beaten up, because that person realized that they were not on their own. And this is a very important component of the ethics for you to understand that you are not left on your own. And I was trying to make it to the dissident movements in the 60s of the last century. And when I started learning more about the dissidents, meeting them in Moscow, then in Kyiv, well, it was pretty hard to directly be introduced to the ones in Kyiv because they were underground. Then Lviv too. I gradually became the part of this dissident movement. And this ethics for me, the same as for my colleagues, for my peers, my brothers, was not about camps and prisons because we were free back then. But the fact that we managed to build this network, these connections in free time, then, for example, when I ended up in the camp or others also started bringing it with them. But you're right, the vast majority met in the camps. And this is where this ethic of solidarity started emerging. Thank you so much. Thank you, Josef. You mentioned an example of what happened to Bogdan Sepelyak, Ukrainian prisoner, and it was a very harsh beating. When the representatives of Ukrainian community started talking about that, as you have righteously mentioned, Mr. Mandilevich joined them. And the Jewish prisoners also started protesting against such behavior coming from the security guards. And now I'd like to give the floor to Rabbi Mandilevich. Would you like to also comment on that and maybe elaborate on what Mr. Josef Zissels has just mentioned? And what would you like to say about this camp solidarity ethics?
Okay. I'm coming back to the story of Mr. Sepelyak. It was our common decision. Ukrainian activists and me, they invited me to consult me what to do, whether to make a harsh step or something more soft. I told for sure we have to have a prolonged strike of all the in the camp. And in fact, the decision was taken on my advice. And then for it was obvious, we are political prisoners and we are together and we have to support each other. It's obvious. And I remember me being punished for that, certainly, as all others, being in a punishment room with Alexei Reznik. And we spoke a lot, you know, in a punishment room, you have a lot of time to speak. And then he told me, you know, why the Ukrainian people support Israel? For you are a symbol for us. Like us, you Jews for 2,000 years wouldn't have your independent state. Now you have it. So it serves as a symbol that maybe, who knows, one day we shall have our independence like you. I believe that the words reflects the issue, you know. And just to mention that that time, the Jewish national movement for freedom of immigrate to go to Israel was the most successful national movement. Just for the reasons that we were supported by hundreds of thousands of Jews all over the world. And fighting for our national rights, certainly we harmed heavily to the Soviet power. Whereas the approach of Zionists was not to mix with the dissidents. It was the knowledge, experience we got from the previous generation of prisoner of Zion. Means Jews were imprisoned for many, many years, and people that were out from the prison told us, the young generation, never mix together dissidents and national movement. We are certainly against the Soviet power, but we have to define our goal. It is to get the freedom to go to Israel, to be there. And I believe, and I remember other Jewish dissidents. You know, a lot of Jews were involved in making and giving a human face to Soviet communism. They would tell us what you are doing on your separate goal. Let's work together. Let's crush Soviet power, and obviously you will deserve your democratic liberty as a part of a general democratic liberty in a new Russian state. We opposed it, and we told no, in no way. We believe that fighting for our national rights as Jews, we will bring support and help to other nations, which happened. For it is obvious that our national movement for freedom of the Jews finally was a blow to the whole Soviet system. Thank you.
Дякую дуже, Раві Менделевич.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Mendelevich. Within the context of our current discussion, I would like to quote Arya Budka. And this is the quote from Miroslav Marinovich's book that is called The Universe Behind Barbed Wire. And I quote Arya Budka, and he's referring to the prison camp here. There were two clear forces of the resistance in camp, Jews and Ukrainians. And since then, it has been the custom. If Jews and Ukrainians say yes, then the protest will take place. There was the fear among Chekists that the oppressed peoples would be able to find common ground even in the prison camp. Mr. Budka, would you comment on that quote? You know, I would like to dwell upon a slightly different matter. I would like to elaborate on this type of collaboration and cooperation in the prison camps. The thing is that in the prison camps, there were people who were imprisoned, who were in captivity, but they were free spiritually. They were very different from the rest of people who lived in slavery, basically. In the bigger prison camp, as we used to call it, people were trying to reach the authorities and to find the way to find some benefits, and there was some rivalry, and that is why it was very difficult for people to see eye to eye. This is what was happening outside the prison. There were the power struggles, and people were trying to make a living and were fighting for better living. But that was not the case in the prison camp. We were all equal. It was equal footing, and that is why completely different ethics was created. Thank you, Mr. Aryev. That is a very peculiar thought. I see some new perspective to it. I didn't come across this idea in the memoirs or publications. Thank you for explaining the ethics that was the ethic of the political prisoners. Miroslav Marinovich, I would like to give you the floor now.
Пане Мирославе, вас не чути зараз.
Miroslav, we cannot hear you.
Може, це якось з мікрофоном, з навушниками пов'язано раптом?
Так. Зараз
Maybe there is something wrong with the settings. Can you hear me now? Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Важливо те, що табір розмістив усіх на одній платформі.
What was important for me is the equality in the camp. Everyone was persecuted. We all were tortured in different ways. We were all imprisoned. We didn't have any higher or lower social status. Our hair was cut. We were wearing the same clothes. And, you know, sometimes in a normal life, you see different social positions between different ethnic groups. That was not the case in a prison camp. We were all equal. And that helped us to open up. We were all brothers there. We were all close friends. We were all sentenced for our beliefs. And it meant that we respected the beliefs or convictions of other people. And even if it was not always the case, and I would give some examples in a second, since there were some clashes of views, at least we were able to tolerate the opposing views simply because we were paying the very high price for it, for these views. Let me give you an example. We were all closed in a prison camp, and there were Ukrainian nationalists who were advocating for the Ukrainian separation from Russia, and there was Igor Ogurtsov, a Russian monarchist. Therefore, he was viewing Ukraine as a part of the Russian Empire. Jews were living next to the former police officers that were collaborating with the Nazis. Armenians and Azerbaijani had to avoid the topics of Karabakh. We were all on equal footing, and we were learning to understand one another. Another important point to mention when it comes to Ukrainian-Jewish relations in the prison camp is that we learned not just to listen to the arguments of the other people, but to hear them, to analyze them, to ponder upon the arguments of the opponents. And we learned to a certain extent to respect the pain of one another. And I remember my conversations with Semen Hluzny, and we discussed Ukrainian Jewish history in the prison camp. And I remember that we were joking, and Semen Hluzny said, he said that when I was referring to the Ukrainians' views, I was mentioning some sort of negative opinion about the communist state been created with the help of Jewish Bolsheviks, who played a more important role in that compared to the Ukrainian ones. Semen Hluzny laughed at it, at this phrase of mine, and he said, well, even if we contributed to the creation of this communist state, we will contribute even more to dismantling of this state. And it made me laugh. And the role of Jewish dissidents in dismantling of the communist empire was a significant one. And the quote of Arya Vudka actually shows that we were able to reach common ground. We knew how to understand each other. I am very grateful to Arya Vudka for memorizing poems of Vasyl Stus,
a Ukrainian poet, and he preserved these poems for us. That is an invaluable contribution to the Ukrainian culture. And, you know, I can talk for long answering these questions, but I will leave it here for now. Thank you very much, Miroslav. If you would like to comment on the topic of Camp Solidarity, Rabbi Mendelevich, please go ahead.
Use the opportunity to memorize my two closest friends, Dr. Evgeny Sverstyuk and Zinovy Krasivsky. I don't believe people know in Ukraine the names, but they were really heroes. But what is most important to me, they were my teachers. From Dr. Sverstyuk, I learned a lot about the ethics of the behavior of human being on conditions such as in a prison camp. And Zinovy Krasivsky was really helped me a lot, specifically to organize my prolonged hunger strike. So I used the opportunity to memorize the two prominent gentlemen. Thank you.
Щиро дякую вам, Равине Менделевичу, за згадку.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Mendelevich, for bringing up the names of renowned Ukrainian dissidents who unfortunately passed away, but their legacy, their poems, and their values linger, and we learn from them. Yevhen Sverstyuk and Zinovy Krasinsky. Thank you very much. You wrote heartbreaking memoirs on them, and I would like to thank you for bringing them up. Thank you for raising your hands. Josip, if you don't mind, I would like to give the floor to Alexa Riznik since he hasn't taken the floor yet. Alexa, please go ahead. Alexa Riznik is a Ukrainian dissident from Odessa. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you well. I am very glad to see my mates from the prison camp. We call each other the former prisoners, the ex-cons. And when I was serving my first sentence, I learned Polish. The soldiers from the Ukrainian insurgents army who were serving the sentence in the same prison taught me Polish. And then I learned English. I knew that I would not be able to go abroad because I had two criminal records already. That is why I decided to learn Lithuanian and Latvian instead of English. And the reason for that is for this person, Gunnar Astad. Unfortunately, he passed away and he was actually poisoned. But he is an outstanding figure. He was serving a 12-year sentence, 13-year sentence, and he had the sentence of 15 years in total. And the ethics. I wasn't just serving my time, I was learning languages. I was talking to Lithuanians and Latvians and Jews as well. I see Arya Vodka. Arya Vodka is a person who was able to bring my poems abroad, 6 of them. He learned them by heart, he memorized them, and this is how he passed them across the border. And this friendship with the Jews lingered. And we Ukrainians had to learn from somebody how to create a state. And we were learning from Israel, from Jews. I visited Israel in 1992. There were 15 dissidents who went to Israel. Kravchuk gave us a plane, and 20 MPs went there to meet Ari Vudka. I am very grateful for his effort in bringing my poems abroad. Kuznetsov, Byrnes, Chernov,
Так, пан Давид є з нами.
Pan David is with us. I don't know if maybe you remember that in 1992 we went to the rooftop of Kuznetsov's house and we had a reception there. We had a small buffet and we were able to relax and finally enjoy the moment after so many years. The life in the prison camp, these memories, I return to them a lot when I speak to the students, as luckily I am invited to lecture students. I am well known in Odessa, and I'm very glad to see all of you. Thank you very much, Alex, for your words. And we see that through decades, the author of the poems, the poet himself, is thanking the person who brought these poems to Munich, over 300 poems of Ukrainian poets. Josef and then Rabbi Mendelevich.
I would like to also add something to the first question that you have raised, that ethical solidarity did not emerge for no reason, did not emerge out of the blue. It was determined by the people, by their stories, by their convictions that they had back in the day, that they had even before they were put behind the bars. And this was related to the fact that these were caring people. And here, I'm not talking about caring about something specific, because, for example, Ukrainian nationalists cared about the destiny and fate of their people and their future state. Then the Jews also cared about the Zionist component, moved to Israel and followed their religion there. There were also Democrats who were protesting and who had their ethical angle. They were against violence, against lies and injustice. But this is what united all of them, because all of them had some ethical angle and certain convictions and beliefs. When people like that are gathered, it is impossible to not have a joint ethical component fighting one enemy. And we cannot forget about that, because if there is one enemy, then yeah, it does unite you. Maybe this is not the most important thing, but this is the ethics of all those who ended up in those camps. And I would like to give another example that I highlight in my article. An example about when the camp administration in Ural started preparing a provocation. And they were trying to provoke Ukrainians. There were also former Russian police collaborators, other people who engaged in violent actions. They were trying to provoke them to start conflicting with the Jews. And when the camp population found out about that, two Ukrainian nationalists came to these collaborationist police officers who were serving for 25 years in the camps, and they said, if anything happens to the Jews, you'll have to deal with us. And this is a very important testimony that is described in a few books, in few memoirs by former dissidents. It is very important that Ukrainian nationalists from the insurgents army, who always were considered to be anti-Semitist, they actually decided to protect the Jews, because this was going against their Christian beliefs. And almost all Ukrainian dissidents were genuine Christians. And this is a very important testimony of what Camp Solidarity is. Thank you. Thank you, Josep. Mendelevich was giving you a round of applause, maybe because his opinion also coincides. Over to you then. Over to you, Mr. Mendelevich.
So, I think, Kachan, do you expect something from me? Saying something about that?
Я думала, що ви піднімали
руку. Yes, I thought that you were raising your hand to comment, or was I wrong?
No.
Just applause. Okay, thank you. І я запрошую ще до цього.
Okay, now I would like to give the floor to our guests, Mr. Zoryan Papadyuk, Anatoly Goldfeld, and David Mayan. If there's anything you would like to add or comment regarding what was mentioned earlier, please, the floor is yours, because we're going to move on to the next question. Zoryan, please don't forget to unmute your mic. You can find it at the bottom, on the left of your Zoom screen. Okay, Zoryan, while you're looking for that, maybe you could ask someone to help you with unmuting yourself. In the meantime, Anatoly, you raised your hand, right? Then can we give the floor to you? Please don't forget to unmute your mic. Please unmute your microphone because we cannot hear you.
We don't hear you. Please switch on your microphone. Добре, поки пан Анатолій, будь ласка, пане
Okay, why? Now I'd like to give the floor to Doran then. Yeah, I think my mic is fine now. Yes, we can hear you. I have to say that Camp Solidarity emerged not only at the personal level, but also due to the outlook, the worldview, because people who ended up in a camp, you know, there were different communities. There was a Lithuanian community, Jewish community, etc. And everyone was trying to find this community, depending on their outlook, and everyone could tell that their opinion coincides. And this solidarity also played a huge part. I remember that quite often I had to communicate with the Jews, and what surprised me at first was, well, many of them were people who were raised in Russian culture, environment, and we had some interesting discussions and conversations, and I think they oftentimes agreed with me, because maybe I was talking about the things that they were looking for, such as Mihailo Gefeld, the late Mihailo. And such our discussions resulted in us reaching common ground. Aside from that, as it was mentioned, any solidarity activities involved Ukrainians, Lithuanians, Jews. This was a joint fight. This was a true solidarity. And even today, long has passed since we were in the camps. We still keep in touch. Thank you. Thank you so much, Zoryan. Anatoly, over to you now.
Okay, I hope you hear me now.
Very well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Regarding your general question, which I understand is what was the measure of solidarity between different groups, first of all, between Ukrainian, how you call them, dissidents, and Jewish and Zionist people, Jewish dissidents. my story was far from being with any contact with Ukrainian activists in the Ukrainian question in general before I came to the camp. It is interesting that some measure of understanding of the other side, of the Ukrainian side, developed gradually during my presence, during my 3 years in the camp after my trial. The interesting story, when we arrived, me and my friends arrived, Zionists arrived to the camp number 19 in Mordovia in the late of August 1971. An article appeared in the newspaper of the labor camps, for which inmates use some derogatory term, which I translate as the truth of renegades, or something like that. An article was named reactionary link, or something similar, and it talked about links between Jewish activists, Zionists, and the members of Ukrainian national movement outside of the USSR. For that reason, or maybe not, but I guess for that reason, the reaction of Ukrainians, the members of Ukrainian national movement in the camp to our arrival was generally positive, sometimes even friendly. During my stay in the camp, I evolved also, my views evolved. And this was due to some contacts with the members of Ukrainian national movement, of which today most I don't remember, but I remember two important meetings because the people involved were famous. One meeting I had with, and then it impacted me in some way. One meeting was at the end of my term in April or May 1974, when I ended up in the solitary confinement, and simultaneously Vyacheslav Chernovil also was there, and we had one time relatively short communication, but this was very important for me, was interesting. I found him unassuming, in spite of him being famous, very nice man, and we exchanged opinions, ideas about national movements in general and the similarities and differences between Jewish and Ukrainian movements of current political situation, etc. It had some lasting impression on me. It is important to meet real people, not only to read about idea or movement in general, important for me at least. The other important meeting was with people already mentioned, with Vasyl Stus, this poet, very famous Ukrainian poet, which I didn't know then. Okay, people explained me. The meeting took place for his initiative, and I remember that we, 2 hours, went along the fence of the camp, and he wanted to know something. He wanted to know in general about different national movements, and in my case, in particular, about Zionist movement, about ideology, and more about, I don't know how to call it, about behavioral psychology of our people, what brought me to this camp, to this idea, etc., etc. In turn, he was very intelligent. My impression was he was very knowledgeable. In turn, I also asked questions. And he gave me kind of a lecture about Ukrainian movement and more about Ukrainian literature with references to many, many authors and poets, which I didn't know. And I was unprepared because how could I know? I couldn't know it from Soviet school. And frankly, I didn't try to find such information. But the meeting was very interesting. I got the impression from this meeting there is a depth, not only words of I'm participating in national movement, but the depth of the culture behind this man and probably behind the Ukrainian movement in general. So it also was a lasting impression. I would like to mention one guy, much simpler, a simple person. I'm not sure he's known, Misha or Mikhail Dyak, which I met in the working part of the camp. And sometimes we discuss things. He was, if I remember correctly, he was a policeman in some town in Ukraine. And at some point in time, he started to distribute leaflets and brochures of national content. This is more or less the general idea. As a generalization, I would like to add that we have, it's one side of the equation when I understand, especially in my contact with Stus, that there is a depth behind it, there's a cultural depth. And the other side, we have a common enemy, a common adversary, the big Soviet empire, which would like to oppress and suppress us all. And the other side that when I discuss with my Ukrainian counterpart, I suddenly find some similarities between our desires. There was also, the last remark, there was an element of asymmetry between us because we Jews in the camp, Zionists, hoped that we somehow will finish our term, will get out of the camp, will emigrate to Israel, which we have as a sovereign state. There was no sovereign Ukrainian state then. Today, as I understand it, the situation is fundamentally different. There are wars, of course, there are difficulties, but there is a Ukrainian state, and we are, of course, at least on the equal standing. That's more or less everything that I want to say. Thank you.
Дякую дуже, пане Анатолію.
Thank you so much, Anatoly. First and foremost, thank you for mentioning yet another Ukrainian political prisoner, Mikhail Dyak, who unfortunately died in the camp. And a very important thing was written by Josef Meshner about him. And this is just a side comment, and Josef also mentions this person in a very positive light. We have a quick question from the chat box by Margarita Yehorchenko. Question to Anatoly. Did you ever write any memoirs about your conversation with Vasyl Stus?
No,
because Margarita is working on that.
No, I'm sorry, I did not write yet any memoirs of my own.
Yet, though.
Yes.
And
Margarita has another question. Can she contact you? Well, I think that we can discuss it after.
Of course, I will be pleased. Yes, of course.
Дякую дуже, Маргарито, за питання.
Thank you so much for your question, Margarita.
And
Elisa, could you please mention who is your question addressed to? In the meantime, I would like to give the floor, since everyone already took the floor before that. David, I would like to give the floor to you because Zaryan Papadyuk mentioned you. So could you please say, what do you think about the camp ethics of solidarity? How do you respond to this question? Is the floor over to me? Yulia, before I start responding to your question, first I would like to apologize for speaking in Russian. Sorry? Well, we agreed that you will be speaking in Russian, so I used to read Ukrainian magazines in the camp in Ukrainian, and Suchasnis, modernity, among them. But I didn't speak it, and especially now I cannot speak Ukrainian. Before I respond to your question, I would like to address a question to Alexei Reznikov. We were in the prison camp number 36 in Ural. Alexa, can you hear me? I think that is the case. And you told me about how Soviet authorities in Dnipro, which used to be called Dnipropetrovsk in the past, were looking at the mustache that looked Ukrainian Cossack style. Remember that story that you told me back then? And I read, I do remember that. Right? Now, let us move on. And I also saw the name of Justina Serhienko. Are you Alexander Olexa Serhienko's son? That is true. And Justin, can you confirm that? Is that your father? Yes. This is my father. It is when I hear your voice, I would like to say that I have the most positive memories about your father. We talked with him a lot about the topics of interest. We talked about Ukrainian topics, Jewish topics, and Jewish Ukrainian topics. Thank you. And it is a pleasure that at least online we can meet. And I would like to mention my campmate. And now, Yulia, I'd like to respond to your question regarding the camp ethics. Well, camp ethics basically is the rule of decent behavior of a decent, educated man that was formulated for the specific camp conditions. And the main principle is the following: never do something that will benefit you but harm another camp person, another inmate. And in our circle, I'm talking about the Jews, the Zionists, I'm talking about Ukrainians, patriots, and some, but not all, some Russian Democrats. This was the rule of thumb. Aside from that, there were also some additional circumstances. For example, do not participate in building prisons and fences that are intended for you. And clearly the camp administration was not happy with that, but we were sticking to that rule. Or another thing, there was also a very strict rule of working and sticking to all the assignments that were set for us. Let us not forget that a camp, aside from being a way of political repression and oppression, it was also a tool very important for the Soviet Union economy. The biggest crime in the camp was an attempt to flee, and the second one in this ranking of the crimes within the camp was refusal to work or not sticking to the performance norms. So the camp ethics required to not overperform. So you could perform 100 or 101%, but not more than that. And we were sticking to that rule. And another thing that I'd like to mention that also pertains to the camp ethics. to never resolve conflicts between the campmates by means of involving administration. And also, I would like to once again say that these were necessary rules how to behave. They were not created when I was there. I came to camp in 1971 after a one-year-long trial. I met people who introduced me to these rules, and they believed that these rules were very decent and they were sticking to them. And I'd like to did I respond to your question, Yulia? Yes, thank you so much, David. These were very interesting facts about the rules that were used. And I'm also very grateful. I'm also really glad that you saw Alexei Serhiyenko's son and his daughter, Olga, is also here with us today. And also, Josef, thank you for mentioning that. I also would like to say that, yes, these are the grandchildren of a very outstanding individual who spent many years in the camps, Stalin and later Khrushchev camps too. So I would like to express the gratitude to this family, to the people who were building and creating history. I see Joseph raising his hand. Mr. Mendelevich will give you the floor soon, but in the meantime, I'd like to say that Mykola Horba is with us. Welcome, and I will give the floor to you soon as well, after the comment is made by Mr. Mendelevich. Now, over to you.
Thank you. Speaking about friendship and solidarity, I have to mention that I, as a Jew, and I believe other my Jewish friends, had a problem with the conduct of Ukrainian national movement against the Jews. Nobody of them was ready to condemn the pogroms of Bogdan Khmelnytsky and other followers, and as well not whatever did Bandera and other national organizations. There were some explanation and excuses. Okay, you know, in a condition when you are together in a prison or in cell, you cannot raise the question. But still, there was a bitter feeling that something is not that smooth as we try to pretend. Thank you.
Дякую дуже за ваш коментар, пане Менделевич.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Mendelevich. It was right to the point, and maybe we will get back to it a bit later today during our discussion. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Mykola. And we are now discussing the first question on the camp ethic of solidarity. You haven't heard the discussions before you joined, but could you elaborate on the ethic of solidarity in the prison camps? First of all, I would like to see whether there are any mates who've been serving the sentence with me. I see Alexa Riznikiv and Zoran Papaduk waving at you, as well as Arya Vodka. Marislav Barnovich is with us, and Josef Zissels is with us. And my son has just called me. Mykola, we are listening to you carefully. Is there Arya Vodka here? Yes, he's here. Arya, I cannot see you. He's waving at you, but it also depends on your screen whether you see him or not, but he can hear you. Well, I do not know what you were talking about before. It took me quite a while to join. There is a war ongoing. The power was out. and the sirens are on outside. All right, Mykola, I believe that we can switch to the second question, and I see that we have two hands raised, Miroslav Marinovich and then Rabbi Mendelevich. Thank you for giving me the floor. Speaking about solidarity, I would like to recall the memories of Josef Mendelevich. As he mentioned the calendar of the week that was according to the Christian calendar, with Sunday being day off, being a holy day, and that put Jews in a difficult position when they had to violate some rule, either the rule of God or the rule of work in the prison camp. And I was very much curious to know that other inmates were helping Joseph when he was trying not to work on Saturday. Other inmates were helping him to meet the daily target so that he could make it through the day and show the target being met for that particular day, for Saturday. Unfortunately, the security guards understood the plan quite often, and they forced Rabbi Mendelevich to work anyway. However, the very fact that the other inmates were helping Rabbi Mendelevich not to work on Saturday, I believe that it is worth bringing up today during our discussion. Thank you, Miroslav, for your account, and I see, Rabbi Mendelevich, you agree to that, and I guess you wanted to add something because I see your hand raised.
Okay, I'm speaking too much today, so I will be short. There was an Ukrainian prisoner in charge of reporting the quantity of production every day. So I arranged with him that I will prepare in beforehand the necessary production for the day, and he will report as if I did it during Sabbath. So on Sabbath I wouldn't work, and for a long time the authorities wouldn't disturb me. One day, because of my part in the in the strike about, as I mentioned, Sepiluk case, they sentenced me for 3 years of imprisonment under harsh condition in Vladimir prison for keeping Sabbath. The real reason was not only that, but I'm certainly thankful to our Ukrainian friends that helped me not to violate the rules of Sabbath. More than that, in kitchen we had a Ukrainian cook. As you know, we Jews, actually I am a rabbi, I was not permitted to eat meat. So he would put aside meat and bring me only pure soup, kosher, not together kosher, but something. And again, I remember, and I mentioned in my books and in my stories, thank you very much.
Дуже дякую, пане Йосифе. Щось хоче додати пане Олекса Різників?
Thank you, Joseph, and I see that Alexa Riznicki wanted to add something. Alexa, turn on your microphone. I just wanted to say a couple of words on the solidarity and on ethics. You see that many Ukrainian Jews moved to Israel, and many of them speak the language. And Arya Vodka speaks Ukrainian in an amazing way. Had he stayed in a prison camp longer, I would have started learning Jewish. We have Boris Khersonsky, who lives in Odessa, and he writes in Russian and in Ukrainian. We see that there are some similarities between Ukrainian and Jewish and Hebrew. I see that I would like to ask a question to Mr. Anatoly. Could you comment on the following? This is a question from Elisa Bremling. And she's asking the following: what the solidarity would look like between Ukrainian nationalists and Jewish Zionists? What is your perspective? Do not forget to unmute yourself.
Unmuted, yes. Can you repeat the question, please?
What would your solidarity will look like out the camp between Ukrainian nationalists and Jewish Zionists?
Okay, what would my solidarity look like? I tell you, probably it is my certain measure of solidarity exists, probably due to my communication with Ukrainian people in the camp. Because outside of the camp, I almost had no communication. But I learned this topic there. I feel, despite a lot of differences, historical problems, etc., I won't repeat all this, I feel certain sympathy to understand their position. For example, today, without going into politics, I completely feel myself in solidarity with the struggle of the Ukrainian people to protect their independence when some big brother would like to finish it. I have no contacts at this moment with, I have no political or social activity whatsoever in the later years outside of the camp. But as a person who knows what goes on, I just feel this certain measure of solidarity with other people, not like me, but who struggle for similar interests and desires and similar truths of their own. It's a little bit general, but I have no concrete contacts with nobody to specify.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Будь ласка, пане Мирославе.
Miroslav, please go ahead.
Я можу повторити слова пана Йосефа, що я, здається,
And
забагато
here I would like to echo what Joseph has said. I think that I'm taking too much time today and responding too often. Just being brief, I would like to say that the mutual understanding that we were able to reach in the prison camps, that mutual understanding between Ukrainians and Jews, the early stage of the creation of that relation turned into a beautiful phenomenon of the conferences dedicated to Ukrainian-Jewish cooperation and Ukrainian-Jewish relations. In the 1990s, these conferences took place in Kyiv and also in Israel. We came to Jerusalem. Therefore, based on our camp experience, we were setting the scene for the Jewish Ukrainian cooperation and mutual understanding at the time of independence Ukraine. Josip, well, I have joined the ranks of those who talk too much. After the camps, and I'm referring to the late 80s with the Soviet Union. We worked together in Ukraine, Leonid Milavsky, Ukrainian dissident. We worked together with Ukrainian dissidents. We were preparing the movement. And when there were some rumors circulating about the crackdown on Jews, we all together were against those rumors. And we even named the source of these rumors. This was a joint campaign against this kind of disinformation from KGB. Apart from that, there was the foundation of assistance to political prisoners and their families. I remember that when I was in prison, a famous Ukrainian historian from Lviv was bringing me some things from home. Yaroslav Dashkevich. Yaroslav Dashkevich. And I was also bringing some things to the families of Ukrainian dissidents within the framework of this fund. Thank you very much for your comments and for your accounts and for expressing your views. I believe that we looked at the ethic issue from different angles, and we have discussed the camp solidarity. And now I would like to offer you a slightly different question. Learning about a different culture, when Ukrainians learned about Jewish culture and Jews learned about Ukrainian culture, it had an impact, and if it had an impact, how it affected the view on identity. And I would like to explain why I'm asking this question. It was prompted by an account from Mihailo Heifetz. He is a renowned dissident, Jewish dissident. He was the first who started writing about Vasil Stus. And many years later, when speaking on a conference in Ukraine, Mihailo Heifetz said the following: I was a completely denationalized person. The concept of nation simply did not exist for me. It was completely removed from my life. It was only in the prison camp that I saw people for whom it was dear and important, Ukrainians, and they were able to convincingly explain to me why it was important to them. And this particular deliberation on the national identity as a representative of a Jewish nation, as a national duty. Mihailo Heifetz says that these celebrations were prompted by Ukrainians who were in the same camp with him. And I would like to ask our speakers to share your views. Did you have the similar experience? I heard some of you mentioned earlier today that it was the camp that where you that allowed you to open Ukrainian culture for yourselves, to discover Ukrainian culture, and how did it influence your identity? Maybe Josef Zissels would like to take this question first, because I know that you have similar experience.
I grew up in Chernivtsi, in a Russian-speaking family, not religious one, even though father graduated from Heder in Romania. And the basics of some religious history and culture is something that I obtained from my father when I was young. But when I was already a student in the 60s, when I started higher education, my Jewish religion and culture became secondary, and I became interested in the democratic movement under the influence of Mr. Sakharov, because I was majoring in physics, and later on, when I met Ukrainian dissidents, for example, Mikhailo Koren, very well-educated person. He was very well-versed in Ukrainian literature and history, and he drew my attention to how important it is to go back to your national and religious roots. And you know, because I was so obsessed with the democratic values, I started forgetting about that, and I'm very grateful to him, because he yet again underscored that you cannot neglect your roots, your national and religious roots. And after that, after my release, I also was a part of the Jewish movement, but I think that the impetus was given to me by Mr. Horing. And every time I speak, every time I write something, I always give this example. And now I put it in the following way. One cannot understand general human values if you don't properly process your culture and your values. You cannot forget about it, and you cannot go from the feudalist system to the socialism. And Mykola Horval is also here. I would like to say that there was a hymn to Jerusalem written in the camp, and he, as a composer and a poet, also participated in that. There were also Bahrat Shervendan from Armenia and some other people in this group. I don't remember who exactly formed a part of that group, but they wrote it, they composed it, and they managed to transfer it out of camp. And this was this interaction between different cultures, Christian and Jewish one. They handed it over from the camp. It reached Israel, and it was even performed, this hymn for Jerusalem, back when they were still imprisoned in those camps. Thank you. Thank you, Josep. Well, I'm sorry for chiming in. I didn't do much. I didn't contribute that much. Simply needed to write the music sheet, and thank God it saw the world. So I did not contribute to composing this music. I simply wrote it down. But who composed the music then, Mykola? I don't know. It seems to me that it was by the Armenian guy. Yusuf, what was his last name? Shahverdan. Oh, Shahverdan. I think Shahverdan was the one who composed it. I think the lyrics was by him. I don't know. Maybe even music was composed by him, because he hummed something and I was writing it down. I was writing down the music sheet. Oh, by the way, there was also this guy from Israel. Could you remind me? David, you remember, because he used to be a prosecutor and investigator in Leningrad. Butman? Could you repeat the name? Butman? I think he was in police. Also one of the guys from that plane. Yeah, he was an incredibly interesting personality. I wonder if he's sound and fine. Does anyone know? Oh, he unfortunately passed away. I saw him in Israel in 1988. When I was in the parliament, there was a large international conference. I think it was dedicated to the human rights, and it was held in Jerusalem. And he met me, I was met at the airport, and he said, yeah, so for those few days when I was in Jerusalem, I also visited his place. He showed me around Jerusalem, so I'm grateful. I'm grateful to him. Well, too bad that he's not well. Altman is also not with us. And I think Shachverdan is somewhere in America, but I failed to trace him. I heard that he's unwell and he doesn't want to talk to people. Because I would like this to be composed. Because there is a question in the chat box. It's called the Hymn for Jerusalem. Yeah, it was performed in Israel, but I think that we can still find it because it was in the 70s. I even slightly remember the lyrics. I don't remember all of it. No, this is a different one. Thank you so much. And now I would like to ask, what was it like for you meeting a different culture? Did it transform your identity? Did it change it? Did it enrich your identity? Or did it let you find out more about other ethnicities? So, Arya, what is your experience? Well, first and foremost,
в'язні, що не були знайомі взагалі з українською культурою. Вони казали, це якийсь дивний народ, всі поети.
It seemed to me that Ukraine is also weird, everyone was a poet. We just couldn't understand that all those who could write nice poems in Ukrainian were sent to the camps. Because we thought, wow, nation of the poets. But when I was in the prison camp 36, there were handwritten poems by Vasil Stus that Ukrainians would pass to one another. And when it was given to me and I took a look at it, I immediately realized that we're talking about a genius among poets, not your average poet. And this gave me the understanding that I wanted to take these poems and poems by other Ukrainian poets because we understand that they wanted to erase their talent, and it is a good thing that I managed to, keep it in my head because they would never find it there. If it was written somewhere physically, they would have found it, but since it was all memorized by heart, and this introduction to Ukrainian culture gave me a lot. And in general, I would like to express my gratitude to Yulia for this meeting, for letting us to see our peers from the camps, at least on the screen now. Both are peers from Ukraine and our Jewish peers. But I think the important thing is also to talk about the future. So, if the chance arises, I believe it would be great to also organize a meeting like that. Thank you. Thank you, Arya. If I may, I would like to ask one quick question. I wonder if Noach is alive. a close friend of mine who also lived in Israel. Are the guys still alive? Could you probably say a few words about them? Knoch is alive. Regarding Yachman, I don't keep in touch with him, but I haven't heard anything. I think he should be still alive. And don't forget to mention the book that you have written about Moscovia, the aggressor that is attacking Ukraine. By the way, it was translated into Ukrainian in the States. We have a joint enemy now, because when there was a war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, they discovered so much Russian weapon with those terrorists. And I remember the first war in Lebanon, there were entire underground warehouses and storages, huge amount of weapon. You know, the weapon that could supply all the terrorists globally. And even an entire group of people who were supposed to come to Lebanon and start a war with us. It's just that we managed to come there first. Arya, Mykola, thank you so much. We digressed from the topic of our today's meeting. But Mykola, thank you for these questions that you have addressed to Arya just now. It demonstrates that we need to organize yet another meeting so that we can share all the news, share information about the recent publications, because I know that each and every one of you have written lots of different publications in the recent years, and it's very important to collect all of that and then also look for the ways to make these publications popular, because we are talking about shaping the future, and education helps us to shape the future. That is why your texts, your testimonies need to be popular, because I personally learn a lot from them, and I know that I'm not the only one who would like to learn from you. Well, this is about the future plans to further work on our dialogue. In the meantime, by the way, as a moderator, I promised that we would have Q&A. So now is the time for our audience to ask their questions. You can either submit them to the chat box, or you can raise your hand and ask your questions out loud. And while you are processing which questions you would like to ask, I want to, we were talking about the solidarity ethics, and your testimonies also mentioned that you were working on tolerance culture. And Mr. Mendelevich mentioned that it was not easy, given the dramatic episodes in the Ukrainian Jewish history. But my question is, did you have any fights? Did you have any stumbling blocks in the camp when you were talking about these historical episodes? For example, talking about Khmelnytskyi or pogroms. These are historical facts. We are talking about them as well. We're not trying to hide it. So did you also discuss these topics? How did such discussions evolve, or did it contribute to increased distance between you and your peers? And after that, we will give the floor to our audience. Or did you not discuss such controversial topics? I think Mr. Marnovich. Oh, Alex, go ahead, but don't forget to unmute yourself. Could you unmute yourself? We never had such conversations, but we had very friendly relationship. Last year, I published a book. I'm trying to show it to you. And here, in this book, you can find a picture that was taken by Yasha Shuslansky. Who remembers him? Arya, do you remember him? Yes. He published a book. He's from Odessa. He published a book. My pen is my enemy was titled the book. And this picture, can you see the picture? Your video is blurred, so we cannot see it. Here is Levko Lukyanenko, as well as Chernovil, Suslansky, and others. And you can even see me in this picture partially. This is a very interesting photo. It demonstrates the friendship among us all and the solidarity too. Thank you. And let us not forget about that. And if the need be, I can send it to you. Thank you. I would like to respond to your question. I don't remember any conflicts. I don't remember us having fights. Even if there was some misunderstanding, I don't remember us having any verbal fights. But I also wanted to respond to your previous question. The question about how the perception of culture changed and evolved in each of us. And I'd like to mention two people, Ivan Svershuk and Josef Mendelevich, who played a very important role in motivating the Christians and the Jews to come back to their culture. This was incredibly important. This was a very important influence, you know, for us. These were individuals with very rich religious background and experience. And I remember Vadim Arenberg was brought from Leningrad, not a religious person, but under the influence of Josef Mendelevich, he obtained a new name. He also became more open to the Jewish culture, and it was a pleasure to observe how this return was happening. This is one thing that I wanted to mention. And another thing that I would like to also mention is something that happened in 1982. The Christians that were celebrating Easter, according to the Eastern Christian calendar, were informed by the camp administration that in case you pray, you will be punished. Well, in any case, we gathered, and an important thing is, you know, I would say that everyone in the camp gathered because we had to support one another. The Orthodox, the Protestants, the Catholics all gathered, and all of us were praying together. And among us, there was Leonid Lubman, a Jew. He didn't come to pray with us because this is a person from a different religious background, but he came to be with us. He came to testify that he supports us. Later on, when all of us were punished, because we were punished, he was punished too. And I remember that After all of that, we wrote a letter to the Pope. Leonid Lubman, when we were signing it, also agreed to sign this letter to the Pope. You know, these are incredibly important things, and it's gonna stay in my memory forever. And I'm grateful to him for his support. Thank you.
Дякую дуже, пане Мирославе, за таке свідчення.
Thank you very much, Miroslav, for your comments, Josef. Well, regarding some sensitive issues, since I was not in my sentence in Ural prison, I was elsewhere. I can say that when I was preparing my article on the Ukrainian-Jewish dissidents in 2017, I interviewed a lot of Ukrainian and Jewish dissidents, and I was asking questions about anti-Semitism in the prison camps where they were serving their sentences. And I asked this question. To both Ukrainians and Jews, and all of them said that they did not recall any cases of anti-Semitism in the prison camps. I asked also Rabbi Mendelevich and some of the dissidents mentioned here today, and they could not recall not a single case of anti-Semitism.
Дякую.
Єдине, що можу додати, що вже після того, як ми розійшлися по своїх
The only thing to add is that when we went back home and we proceeded with our normal life, at the beginning of the 90s, there were some myths around some Mason conspiracy theories, but those people who were spreading this kind of gossip are not with us anymore. But I do not recall anything of that happening when we were in prison camps. Thank you very much, Josep.
Яке базується не тільки на вашому особистому
Thank
досвіді,
you for sharing your experience and sharing the experience of other dissidents you talked to. And now I would like to read the question that we have in chat. This is the question from Zahar Ishov. It is in English, and let me give you a summary of that question. The Ukrainian question was a dividing line for the dissidents, and he is wondering about the Russian dissidents and what was their take on the Ukrainian national issue.
Так, будь ласка, пане Мирославе.
I would like to take this question. Please go ahead, Miroslav. Well, there were different opinions on that. Well, from where I'm standing, the Russian inmates were very different. There were some human rights activists and dissidents, and there were monarchists like Igor Agurtsov. I mentioned him earlier. And of course, he was not that enthusiastic about the Ukrainian question. Sergei Kovalov, a Russian political prisoner, sincerely confessed to me the following. Miroslav, I do not feel the national question. Therefore, he didn't feel it, and he tried to reason on that. Therefore, being a human rights activist, he was in favor of the right of people to stand for its independence. Let me give you an example. There was a group of prisoners fighting with one of the guards, and they were talking about the Ukrainian insurgents army. And Sergei Kovalov actually was arguing in favor of the rights of Ukrainians of establishing such an army and champion their national rights. I remember an outstanding figure of Vladimir Balakhon. Why do I call him an outstanding figure? That is because at the end of the 70s, early 80s, he rose very high in terms of his understanding of the national question. And Joseph Mendelevich's memoirs have a very important quote from Vladimir Balakhon. He said that the Russian nation is a threat to the rest of the world. And this threat could be eliminated only by means of fragmenting of the Russian Empire and leaving only the historic territories to the Russians. And you see that even today, not many Russian opponents to Putin regime rise to this kind of definition. They do not live up to this high standard. That was my example. However, there were other prisoners like Alexander Ogorodnikov, and as we were told, he was dissuading the other Russians from talking to the Ukrainian political prisoners. He was trying to talk them out of talking to the Ukrainian political prisoners, and that is why I say that they were different attitudes. Vladimir Bukovsky.
How did he react to the Ukrainian question?
Як Буковський реагував на українське питання, пане Мирославе?
Я власне описував це.
Тобто ви Буковський?
So you were talking about Bukovsky. Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about Vladimir Balakhonov. Yes, right you are. Bukovsky, no, I didn't talk to him personally. That is why I cannot say anything. I was the one who talked to Bukovsky multiple times. And he was very positive in his attitude to the Ukrainian movement, because he met Ukrainian prisoners at the beginning of the 60s in Mordovia. I cannot give you any specific examples, but I talked to him in Great Britain. He also came to Kyiv, and he was rather supportive of Crimean Tatar movement. He was supportive of everyone who was against the Soviet machine. And he was also in favor of Jews who were in favor of against repatriation. Well, he had very broad views. Miroslav, in his book, writes about Zinovy Krasivsky, our close friend, our fellow, and Krasinski was persecuted since the age of 14. His brother was in the Ukrainian insurgents army. His whole family was sent into exile. He jumped off the train when he was 14, and his odyssey lasted for 30-40 years. He was an avid and committed nationalist. He was among those who were in resistance in Ukraine, and he was arrested in 1967. Therefore, Krasinski could have been an anti-Semitist, but I have never heard anything like that from him. Not a single word, not a single thought of that kind. He was a very good person. He was a kind person. I would like also to mention Lyudmila Alexeyeva. Many of us knew her. She was not imprisoned, but in her book, she criticizes the Ukrainian movement. And her criticism is centered around its silo of nationalism. And there were some clashes of the opinions over there. And it is not over yet pertaining to Russia. As when I went to Russia and I met the representatives of Moscow Helsinki Group, they were asking me why do Ukrainians want to be separately? Why do they want to be a separate country? They were very much surprised that I, as a Jew, supported these ideas, and they told me that it was much better to build the Soviet Union altogether, or some democratic union altogether. And until now, we come across such views, even among former dissidents from Russia. Alexander Podrobiny believes that Russia should be preserved as the state as it is right now. It should not fall apart into pieces, but he believes that they need to build a democratic Russia. I respect him dearly. I understand that he dedicated his whole life to building up this Russian state. And yes, of course, it is difficult to come to the conclusion that Russia should fall into pieces. Only Garry Kasparov, but he's not Russian, came to this conclusion. But he has a Jewish and Georgian roots. He said that Russia should be fragmented, and only after that it will stop being a threat to its former colonies and the rest of the world. So you see that for us as former dissidents, it is rather hard to rediscover once again something that was attractive for us in the past. Some say, okay, let's build a Soviet Union together. Well, we've had enough of that. Thank you. We are fed up. Thank you. Zoran and then Alexa. I wanted to mention Vladimir Bukovsky. When I was serving my time in Vladimir prison, I had an opportunity to discuss the Ukrainian question with him, and he believed the following, that we are protecting you as people, as humans, but we will not do the political work instead of you. Thank you. It means that he was supportive of our work, standing for our borders. Well, he delegated to us our right to do our work. Thank you. Well, I see that Zahar is happy with the answers. Alexa? Well, you see that now many Ukrainians say that Russians are not humans, they are not people. But Miroslav could also attest to that. That when we were celebrating an anniversary of Ukrainian Helsinki Union, Victor Bestov came to us from Russia. He was a real friend. There are very few friends like that in Russia, but they do exist. And I keep on saying that there are some people with proper views even there in Russia, but there are very few of them. They are decent people. I used to live in the Soviet Union after my arrest. And there are people who understand everything that is happening right now, even in Russia. Thank you, Alexa. We have only a couple of minutes left. Arya, I thought I saw your hand. Yes, I would like to comment. It is not an issue of particular Russians, of individual Russian citizens. I believe that we have an issue with the national statements when they started calling themselves big Russians, and when they started calling Ukrainians little Russians. There we had an issue. The worst case, the case of Belarus is even worse, since Belarus is Lithuania, and under Catherine the Great, they were renamed. And this is how they basically neutralized this political force that for years was able to confront the Russian czars. Big Russians, it means that everything is mine. I will invade the Caucasus, I will invade Siberia, I will invade Central Asia. Everything's mine. It all belongs to me. I think that we should dismantle that mindset, and I do not know how to do that. Thank you very much, Arya. We are running out of time. I would like to thank you. We have a question from Benjamin Orenstein, and this is the question that pertains to the cultural influences. And if you don't mind, I would like to borrow this question for our next meeting. And this is the meeting, this is the question that is as follows. Did the cultural context cause you to challenge your understanding of what constitutes your national culture, or where the boundaries of the nation were? Thank you very much. I would like to invite you to our future meetings, and I hope that we will be able to explore even more these issues. I would like to thank our speakers, and I would like to thank our co-organizer of the event. And let me read it out properly. Institute of Russian and Eastern European Studies of Indiana University, the Robert Byrnes Institute, situated in Bloomington, USA. I believe that our today's meeting gives us a lot of food for thought, and I hope that we will have the grounds for future dialogue. I would like to thank everyone. Thank you. Zaryan, see you. Arya, Mikola. Mendelevich, Josef. Greetings. See you next time.
До 120.
I hope that we all live long to 120 years. Well, I don't know. We should outlive Putin, and we'll see after that.